Wife drunkenly flirted with my sister. Thanksgiving was supposed to be about healing this year. My wife, Amy, and I had flown across the country to spend it with my sister, Rachel, and her family. It was our first big gathering since Mom had passed away just 6 weeks ago, and honestly, the weight of her absence was suffocating. But being together as a family felt like the right way to honor her memory. Or so I thought. The day had started off normally enough. The air in Rachel's cozy home was filled with the scent of roasting turkey and the sharp sweetness of freshly baked pies. The weather outside was biting cold, with a layer of frost making the world glitter like something out of a postcard. Inside, though, it was warm, with the comforting chaos of kids running around, the hum of football on the TV, and the rhythmic clatter of dishes being prepared in the kitchen. Amy fit right in, laughing with Rachel over shared memories of Mom while chopping vegetables. Amy and I had been married just over a year, but we'd been together for 4. She had always gotten along well with my family, particularly Rachel. They clicked in a way that made me happy, like two sisters who'd found each other later in life. I'd never once thought to question the closeness they shared. Until last night. After dinner, when the kids were tucked in and the house began to quiet down, we all decided to open a few bottles of wine and reminisce. The conversation floated from funny childhood stories to old family photos and then, as the hours wore on, to more vulnerable topics. By the time the clock struck midnight, everyone's cheeks were flushed from both alcohol and laughter. Amy and Rachel had bonded even further, or so it seemed. They were sitting side by side on the couch, exchanging stories and inside jokes like lifelong friends. I called it a night first. I'm not much of a drinker, and the emotional toll of the day had left me drained. I kissed Amy on the forehead, told Rachel goodnight, and climbed into bed, the distant sound of their laughter echoing down the hallway as I drifted off. The next morning, I woke up to a tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Amy was unusually quiet at breakfast, poking at her food without meeting my eyes. Rachel's usual bubbly energy was subdued, and she seemed to be avoiding being in the same room as Amy. It didn't take long before I realized something was wrong, something I wasn't privy to. It wasn't until later in the afternoon, when Amy stepped out to take a phone call, that Rachel pulled me aside. "Hey, can we talk for a second?" she asked, her voice low. "Yeah, sure. What's up?" I said, sensing the seriousness in her tone. She hesitated, chewing her bottom lip the way she always did when she was nervous. Finally, she let out a sigh. "Look, I don't want to make this a bigger deal than it is, but I think you should know," she trailed off, glancing toward the door to make sure Amy wasn't nearby. "Amy and I were texting last night after you went to bed. We were drunk, and it got a little weird." "Weird?" I echoed, my stomach twisting. Rachel nodded, her face flushed with shame. "We said some things. Flirty things. I don't know how it happened. It's not like that, I swear, but I feel awful, and I thought you should know." I didn't know what to say. My mind was racing, trying to process what she was telling me. Flirty? My wife and my sister? It didn't make any sense. Amy wasn't like that. Rachel wasn't like that. And yet, there was no mistaking the sincerity in Rachel's eyes. She was genuinely upset, and that scared me even more. "Did anything else happen?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Rachel shook her head vehemently. No, it was just texts. But I feel terrible, and I needed to come clean. I nodded slowly, my mouth dry. "Okay. Thanks for telling me." The rest of the day passed in a blur. I couldn't look at Amy without imagining those texts, wondering what she had said, what Rachel had said, and what it all meant. When I finally confronted her that evening, she didn't deny it. "We were drunk," she said, tears streaming down her face. "It didn't mean anything. I swear, it didn't mean anything. But it meant something to me. It meant betrayal, confusion, and a crack in the foundation of our marriage that I wasn't sure how to mend." As I sat there listening to her sob, I couldn't help but wonder, what do I do now? Where do we go from here? The days following the revelation were a mess of emotions. I didn't know how to feel, let alone what to do. Amy's guilt was written all over her face, and Rachel's avoidance only made the tension in the house worse. Thanksgiving had gone from a time of healing to something completely different, a moment that might change everything. At first, I tried to make sense of it. I read the messages Amy reluctantly showed them to me. They were just as Rachel had described, drunkenly playful, peppered with compliments and teasing that tiptoed over the line of appropriateness. No explicit confessions, no overt declarations, but enough to set my mind ablaze with questions. Why? How could two people I trusted so deeply let things veer so far off course, even under the haze of alcohol? And what did it say about our marriage, or about me? Amy apologized over and over again. She said she didn't know what had come over her, that it was a stupid mistake born out of a mix of grief and too much wine. I love you, she said, gripping my hand so tightly it hurt. I'm so sorry. Please don't let this ruin us. But I couldn't shake the image of those words flashing on the screen, the feeling of betrayal gnawing at my gut. Every time I looked at Amy, all I could see was the text thread. Every time I looked at Rachel, I felt an uncomfortable mix of anger and pity. She was my sister, and she'd owned up to her mistake, but that didn't make it easier. We left Rachel's house a day early. The atmosphere had become unbearable, and I needed space to think. The plane ride home was silent. Amy stared out the window, her face streaked with tears she thought I didn't notice. I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I didn't have it in me. Back home, things didn't get easier. I avoided Amy without meaning to, retreating to the guest room under the pretense of needing time to sort out my feelings. She gave me space, but it was clear she was struggling. She'd leave little notes for me, heartfelt apologies scrawled on scraps of paper, but I didn't know how to respond. One night, about a week after we'd returned, Amy knocked on the door of the guest room. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice tentative. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I was ready. She sat down across from me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I don't know how to fix this," she began, her voice breaking. "But I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just, tell me how to make it right." Her vulnerability hit me like a punch to the chest. I realized then that I wasn't just grieving her betrayal, I was grieving the version of our marriage I thought we had. And if I wanted to move forward, I had to decide whether I was willing to rebuild. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know if I can get past this. But I think we need help. Together." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll do whatever it takes." The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. Trust is fragile, and once it's broken, it takes time and effort to piece it back together. But for the first time since that fateful night, I felt a flicker of hope. We weren't okay, not yet. But maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like.